Good evening, everybody. New and existing ABC licenses are invited to attend average orientation training from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Thursday, November 5th, to learn about district ABC laws and regulations, tips for working effectively with the community, settlement agreements, expectations of licenses, best practices, noise abatement, and sound management. Contact Abra Community Resource Office, Sir Fishball by Friday, October 30th. You can also register at 202-397-3971. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Frost. Other commissioners with announcements? Commissioner Brown?
I'd like to make the community aware that I am organizing a community meeting with the Department of Parks and Recreation regarding the dog run at the Bruce Monroe Park. That particular meeting is still being solidified. I'm currently working on the logistics with the appropriate representatives. So I will keep the community abreast through community listservs and through social media. So I will keep the community abreast about the logistics of that particular meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Are there any other announcements from commissioners? Any announcements from members of the community? All right, then we will move on to the official or administrative matters. Commissioner Brown, could you take the roll call, please?
Marvin Johnson. Matthew Goldschmidt. Darwin Frost.
Here.
Rashida Brown, present. Josue Samaran. Absent. Tu Wen, present. Ken Space. Dottie Love Wade. Tom Gordon.
Present.
Patrick Flynn.
Present.
Bobby Holmes. Margaret Hunley. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item is approval of the agenda. Commissioners could look at the agenda, which is at the front of their folders, and let me know if there's anything that needs to be removed, anything that needs to be added, or anything that needs to be tweaked, I guess. Are there any amendments? Hearing none, I would make a motion to approve the agenda as set down. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Any? Sure. No, it's not on here. Commissioner. Well, there's also the issue of the moratorium. Those two are part and parcel. All right, so there's been a request to add the grants moratorium followed by project give back. Then what I would suggest is for the moratorium question, let's put that at the end of administrative matters, because it is administrative in nature. And pending the outcome of that, we can put project give back at the beginning of official business so that it is
Yes, I just want to add that the Planning and Zoning Committee just want to make a quick report on the committee reports.
Okay. So then I hear Planning Committee, under committee reports, and Commissioner Brown has just asked for a Bruce Monroe Task Force update. Are there any other amendments? Going once? All right. Then, I will move to accept the agenda as amended. Is there any seconds? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The agenda as amended passes. Approval of prior minutes. Those should be in tab 1. Commissioners could look over them and see if the votes are correct and if anything's amiss. Do commissioners need more time to review the minutes? Is there a motion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes pass. Next item of business is the 2016 budget. Commissioner Goldsmith, if you'd like to walk us through this, please.
So we've been discussing this for a couple months. There's no surprise in here. It's basically the same budget that we had this past year, but we didn't spend very much money. As you can see, we have a large balance, and that's been distributed over the various line items. We've also added an other category this year, just in case something comes up that's other. And there's not much more to say. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'd move that we accept this budget.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions with regards to the budget? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the budget as submitted, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? Okay, the budget passes. The next item was handed out right before the meeting. It is the language for inclusion in the standard operating procedures with regards to the Planning and Zoning Committee. While the paper that's been distributed is in the form of a resolution, that's, I think, a little unnecessary. We talked about this at the last meeting. We talked about this in the July meeting, I believe is when it was introduced. The portion that would be incorporated into our standing operating procedures would be after the be it resolved that. It's the bolded Planning and Zoning Committee and its responsibilities. If people could look at that and see if that is in keeping with what they would think the amendment to the standard operating procedures would be.
Once the applicant files their BZA application with the BZA, as the time frame based on the notification the BZA gives to the affected commission and the commissioner, the time frame will kind of start when the committee gets notification. No. Usually, the minute the BZA application is filed, the BZA will have 40 days to schedule a hearing within the BZA for the BZA to conduct a hearing on it. So that gives the notification from the BZA to the commission usually take about 15 days. So it's enough time. The time frame will be whenever the BZA notify the affected commission or the commissioner. That commissioner should, in a timely manner, notify the committee so the committee can conduct its review process of the applicant, so they have enough time to make the appropriate recommendation to the commission. That's the time we have to review. That's the time the BZA gives the applicant. I guess what I'm saying, the time frame the BZA gives is enough time for them to give notice to the affected commission, to the affected commissioner, until they establish a hearing date for the BZA based on that person's application date and time.
So even after we establish a hearing date, we still have time and opportunity to weigh in on this.
I think so, yes.
I just didn't want to be so compressed that we even became a hindrance to the process, adding another layer.
No. We definitely have enough time within our own time period to conduct a sufficient review process. If that applicant and that commission need more time, they can always request from the BZA an extension. You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Gordon?
Question, Commissioner Frost. On the final bullet point, item number 2, it says the commissioner in whose SMD the project falls with the public notice of an application appeal. Could you explain what that provision is meant to do?
For the committee will, the affected commissioner, if you have a BZA application, I think it would be appropriate for y'all to come give public notice so the committee can establish a certain time. They'll know the certain amount of time they have to review that application. If you are able to give public notice to the committee, I think that would be the appropriate way. So residents will know, the commission will know, and the committee will know.
Okay, so we're looking at notice to the commission, not public notice, or because public notice is part of the process already.
Yes, public notice to, can you repeat your question again?
Sure. I guess I'm wondering if this is redundant because public notice is already part of the process of the application, so I'm not sure.
The committee would love for you to give public notice, so we'll have some way of documenting what takes place within the commission and with the committee.
But
Does that make sense?
Well, to follow up on Commissioner Gordon, if I may, with these types of cases, usually there's the orange placards for the BZA and things of that nature, so there's
We are aware
already
of that.
public notice. The way the commissions should operate, to my way of thinking, is the regularly scheduled meetings. You will take up the business that's appropriately within your committee, and as part of the meeting process, there should be outreach to various listservs already. So I guess I kind of getting to what Commissioner Gordon was asking is, isn't it redundant because there should already be a public notice? I mean, if you're having public meetings to talk about zoning cases already, then you're giving public notice to let people know what that meeting is and what the topics of that meeting are. And that shouldn't be held up. I mean,
Okay.
for instance, if someone's on vacation or if we're in, there they're laid up for a month for various reasons, it might break down.
I understand what you're saying. I guess since that do sound redundant, I move that we remove that particular line from the resolution.
Okay, so, is that, okay. Friendly amendment, we were removing bullet 2 from the 4 on page 2. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, is there a motion?
A motion, I move that we pass amendments to the planning and zoning operation standard procedures and operations.
All right, I will second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the grants moratorium issue. Commissioner Wade, would you mind to introducing that?
Yes, following a meeting with the members of the grant committee, we recommended to the committee of the whole that the moratorium on the grants be lifted and, removed, and that we go back to full funding of our grants process.
I have one quick question. With regards to the grants process, have they been reviewed, and are there any amendments to the process that you would recommend?
We do not recommend any changes at this time.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Commissioner Gordon.
Question for both Commissioner Wade and Commissioner Goldschmidt. A little more for Commissioner Goldschmidt. As treasurer, is it your opinion that returning to a grants process will not pose an increased burden on you as treasurer, and also is it your opinion that it has a fairly minimal risk of hurting our overall funding situation?
So the first question, no, it will place a bigger burden on me. But to the second question, I think we have to try. We're amassing money because we're not giving out grants. The grants are limited to $1,500 each. And I think that we've gone almost a year without giving out any grants and feedback. And I think that we need to participate in the grants process in order to distribute money to the community. And I think that you have a treasurer who's dedicated and a grants committee who's dedicated to making the process work. And I just think that we have to try. If it fails and we can't get reimbursed from the auditor because our paperwork's not in order, then I think that we can readdress this after the first of the year.
A question for both you and Commissioner Wade. Is this, in your opinion, a better, yes, one of the things when we decided to put a grants moratorium in place that we thought we were going to consider was direct funding of the project, which would still have the benefit of getting money out to the community, but would let us exercise more control over the process and over the funding and reimbursement. Is it your opinion that this is not a vastly different solution, or what's the benefit of continuing of using grants over direct funding?
So I would still say that I think that direct funding is a good idea and that we ought to consider it as often as we can in lieu of grants. But no one is proposing any money for direct funding or any projects for direct funding. I would say when those are proposed, we'll consider them, but I don't think it has to be an either-or situation.
Okay. Just from my own clarification, and I know we talked about this briefly at the committee of the whole, but just for clarification, you know, I was kind of under the understanding that one of the reasons why we had a moratorium was to review the grants process. And so I guess I'm a little confused as to why if there was nothing broken with the grants process, then why we needed a moratorium. So I'm just confused by all of this.
I was one of those who voted against the moratorium. I did not understand
think you were the one that made the motion to have the grants moratorium. Oh, I'm happy to go back into the minutes, but I'm pretty sure. Any other? Yes, Commissioner Gordon.
So one more question, well, at least one more question. Commissioner Goldschmidt, you said that one of the issues with direct funding is that we have not received any requests. Have we put out requests for, we solicited requests for direct funding the same way that we solicited requests for grants? In other words, couldn't we just solicit requests for direct funding and say, this is the same thing we've been doing with grants, but we're going to do it through direct funding? And if that's possible, then are there any other disadvantages to direct funding over grants process?
I just say we haven't solicited either grants or direct funding. I think that we could do both. Like I said, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I'm happy to solicit them, and I think that maybe it'd take this time to let everyone know that if you comply with the grants guidelines and you have a good project to fund, then ANC 1A can help you. Our grants application is online. And again, we're also open to direct funding items. That's sort of my take on it.
Commissioner Wade.
With respect to direct funding, we do have a process for procedures in our bylaws and our standard operating procedures for grants. There are no such procedures for direct funding, to my knowledge. Are you volunteering to prepare this type of document? Bring it up. I don't know. I can't even begin the process, for direct funding. So that's something that perhaps the commission could look into. But before we start direct funding, I think we need to have some kind of procedure.
If I could just make the point again, people are applying for grants. We are sitting on a lot of the community's money, and I think that we have to get the money out to the community. I don't think that we can continue to discuss grants versus direct funding and have a moratorium without, in the interim, hearing grant requests and giving grants to the community. So if there's some long-term plan for this commission to spend its money on direct funding, on some project for the community, then I say let's hear it. But in the month of October, in the month of November, I think that we ought to be free to hear grant applications and decide as a commission whether or not we want to give grants.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Gordon.
And this may be reflecting my ignorance on the process, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it possible to review grant applications and just say, we will continue to fund these projects as merited, but we will not do so by writing a check for you to then reimburse us with receipts, but rather we will fund items directly, which protects the public's money to a greater extent than writing checks and hoping the auditor allows reimbursement.
That would require an amendment to our standard operating procedures and probably to our bylaws. I don't think direct funding is covered. And so that's what I'm talking about. The process is not just as easy as though that would be let it be done. We've got to go through some kind of process to address direct funding. We can't just say, oh, well, we're going to direct fund
Yeah,
this.
but do we know that or do we not know that? I mean, we directly purchase things all the time. We directly purchase business cards. We directly purchase, microphones if we need them. There are things that we can purchase as long as they're in the budget. So that's kind of the question.
I don't think there's anything stopping us from direct funding personally. But sort of, my inclination would not be to waste the public's time on this. This is sort of like an internal ANC matter that maybe is best addressed sort of in committee of the whole meetings. And I would just move in that light that we remove the grants moratorium and we can vote as we feel appropriate.
Okay, so Commissioner Goldschmidt has made a motion to remove the grants moratorium. Is there a second? All right. Pardon? Okay, well then, he seconded your motion. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
No. No. Now those abstaining? The motion passes. The moratorium is lifted. There were 3 against, 0 abstentions. How many for? 8. There were 8 in favor, 3 against, and 0 abstentions. All right. Committee reports. Commissioner Frost, you have a planning committee report.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to remind everybody that the zoning regulations review period, the DC Office of Zoning will be conducting a special public meeting on October 22nd, 2015 at 6:30 p.m. and they will be taking final action on the zoning regulations review, just sections 08 through 06 alpha, which is A, 08 tax 06B, 08 tax 06C. That covers subtitles A through H. The special public meeting will take place at the DC Office of Zoning. Thank you. If y'all want to learn any more information about it, please contact me at 1A07@anc.dc.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Frost. Commissioner Brown?
Making a committee report on the Bruce Monroe Task Force, which is of the ANC 1A. At the last meeting, the ANC passed a Memorandum of Understanding and Contractual Services Agreement between the Bruce Monroe Task Force and the Howard University School of Architecture and Design to develop a community survey report. Just wanted to inform the community about the process that the task force has made in disseminating the survey, both the hard copies and the online survey. Approximately 10,000 hard copies, both in English and in Spanish, were disseminated within the radius of ANC 1A and ANC 1B. We received about 800 responses, both online and through hard copy. And the electronic survey was disseminated through community listservs and by other electronic means. The data currently sits with the Howard University School of Architecture and Design, which will hopefully move forward with developing a survey report. But as we know, the ANC 1A has passed the Memorandum of Understanding and Contractual Services Agreement, but Howard University also has its process for reviewing legally binding agreements, so that particular document is currently sitting under legal review, but we hope that document will move forward. So while we're waiting on approval, the task force will reconvene with next steps after we hear back from Howard University. Just wanted to share that brief update with the community.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. We can now move on to presentations. The first presentation is the Consolidated Alignment for Metrobus Routes 63 and 64. It's your time. If you'd like to use the microphone, that would be helpful.
First, I would like to introduce the team members from Metro and Ddot
microphone's actually over here. Yeah, please do.
I'm Darren Buck. I'm with the Ddot Bicycle and Pedestrian Team.
And I'm Amy Louis with the Contractual
It's like you're half the room.
And my name is Douglas Stallworth, and I'm the project manager at Metro. First of all, I want to thank you all for inviting us to the meeting. And the reason why we're here, as we said, starting in January, we began a comprehensive study of the 60s line. That included the Route 60, 62, 63, and 64. And this comprehensive analysis of the service looked at all aspects of it, from the operations to the service, the routing, the buses, the facilities, the stops and shelters, fares, and everything. Like I said, it was a comprehensive analysis. We've done similar analysis before over the last 8 to 10 years, looking, if you look at 16th Street, Georgia Avenue, you've seen some of the improvements that have been made, and they were based on the studies that we've done. And as part of the study, we developed a series of recommendations. And with these, and tonight, I'm gonna have Will go through these recommendations with you, because there's one at the end, the final one, we need some more input on. So I'm gonna turn it over to Will to describe these recommendations for you.
Thank you, Douglas, and thank you, members of the commission. So you all should have gotten a discussion handout. If you didn't, there's some available at the back of the room there, where Megan's holding them up. And essentially what we're looking to do, there are some recommendations that we've sort of finalized and are ready to move ahead and present to the Metro Board. And those include things like adding weekend service to Route 60, providing all-day and weekday service on Route 63. Right now the 63, as many of you might know, is a weekday peak period only route. And we also want to add new trips to Route 63 that then go over to Farragut Square, that they go down to Rhode Island Avenue and use Rhode Island Avenue to access the western part of downtown DC. And then one of the other ones that and the main reason we're here tonight is to try and get some feedback on, is the idea of consolidating both routes 63 and 64, primarily along 11th Street. If you look in the handout, you'll see the proposed bus route, the proposed alignment of the route, which south of the Georgia Avenue Petworth Metro Station, it would come down 11th. It would have a little jog to the east near Florida and Vermont Avenues that serves some new development areas that are going on there. It also still serves the U Street Metro Station, actually. It was a Vermont Avenue entrance to U Street Metro. It avoids a much narrower part of 11th Street by doing that as well. And then it continues down 11th Street down to Federal Triangle. The idea for this is to try and to consolidate service on 11th is to create more of a frequent bus corridor along 11th, relatively frequent. The proposal is to eventually, over time in this second phase, is to have buses in the peak periods running about every 6 minutes down 11th Street. And what that does is it sort of creates what we like to call a show up and go corridor. It's the kind of thing where you have a much more formal bus corridor. There's one on 14th, there'd be one on 11th, there's one in Georgia. And instead of having the service more diffuse and spread out between 11th and Sherman as it is now, by putting both the 63 and 64 and 11th, it just creates a relatively more frequent corridor. We looked at it earlier on in the planning process, and some of you may have come out to some of the public meetings that we had at the Petworth Library, up at the Tacoma Rec Center. We were thinking of, well, if we're going to combine alignments, we could either do it on 11th or we can do it on Sherman. Our thinking has evolved that it's either going to be on 11th or we're going to keep it as is. Meaning that there'll be still some service on Sherman, but having less of an impactful corridor by having bus routes on 11th. And the reason for that is, and we try to explain it in the photographs you see here in the handout. We recognize, by the way, that there are pros and cons, obviously, to having all service on 11th or having it on Sherman. We looked at these. We spoke with operations folks. We looked at staff. Many staff meetings. There's been a lot of concern about, some folks mentioned that, some of the original data showed that the on-time performance was always better on Sherman than it was on 11th for Metrobus, but you have to keep in mind the number of observations on 11th were almost double that of Sherman, because Sherman today is a peak period only corridor. So it's something to remember there. And you see in these photos here, Sherman here is right about at Fairmont, and 11th is at Euclid. And those are just a good representative photo of why Sherman gives us such pause for concern. The streetscape project on Sherman, while a good project, please don't get me wrong, it created an area where there's bulb outs at the intersections, a raised median along the middle of Sherman Avenue, etc. So what that does is if you were to make it an all-day bus corridor, it makes it more problematic because there could be a garbage truck, whatever it might be that might block traffic on Sherman. It would be much more difficult for any vehicle to go around, especially a Metro bus, given that Sherman has the raised median, and then at the intersections it's even narrower. We did reach out to Ddot. Obviously they're always part of the project team, but when we got a lot of initial concern from the community about using 11th for more bus service, we asked Ddot's bicycle folks to take a harder look at it. And they felt that it made sense that, yes, if you're trying to get a good bus corridor, 11th is the better street for the bus corridor, but we do recognize that there are concerns about the bus lane on there. Over time, it would be implemented in 2 phases. This recommendation, let me be clear, would be implemented in 2 phases. In the peak periods, everything would run downtown all the time because already, the 63 does run downtown. The idea then for the midday, for the off-peak periods, is that at first, the 63 would run, there would be some service downtown, but in order to sort of conserve resources and keep the cost almost neutral to Metrobus, there would be some short-turn trips. There would be some trips that only operate north of the Petworth Metro. But then in phase 2, you would have all-day service on, every bus would be able to go downtown with what we call a one-seat ride. There wouldn't be a transfer forced at the Petworth Metro. I think that's about it. Those are obviously a very 10,000-foot view of that last recommendation, but we did want to get some input from the community about that.
One thing we want to emphasize too is that none of these would take place without having a formal public hearing. This is a study with a recommendation, but nothing is finalized. That's why we'd like to have comments now as we're wrapping up this study, so we want that to be part of the process.
I have a few questions. First of all, what is the process for filing official comments as either part of the study or during the hearing? I mean, what is the trigger for that?
We'll be wrapping up the study hopefully in November. So we would like to have, if there was some type of a formal recommendation, a resolution from the ANC, we'd like to have that, within the next 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks if possible.
Well, we could do it by November 12th. Yeah, we could consider something on November 12th. That's the next time we meet.
See, the resolution would be important for a formal process of making changes, which would include the public hearing. So we could always, we may not necessarily, it might be included within the study itself because we will be wrapping that up.
Well, then my only comment would be, should you have done outreach last month?
So we had a formal outreach, but we decided this would be a good process because this ANC was so close to the corner. And, we know how, with the timing of the ANCs and being able to get on the agenda, it takes some time.
Sometimes, not this time. I also have questions regarding how this impacts bike lanes. I know Sherman is Sharrows. I think 11th has a bike lane, if I'm not mistaken. And I know some people have indicated that they think it's safer to ride on 11th now, and it may not be so after, so I'd like to know that.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Darren Buck. I have a little bit of a cold, I apologize. Thank you for the microphone. We didn't take it lightly. It is going to increase the number of buses per hour. I don't recall the numbers, up to 10 or 11 per hour. So yeah, we definitely didn't take it lightly. 11th is one of our busiest bike lanes in the city. We thought that the biggest trade-off that we thought was a net positive was taking bus traffic off of the Florida to Vermont section, which is exclusively Sharrows. So where bicyclists do have to then mix into the general purpose lane, they're no longer having to compete with the 60 line buses. for that space, and we thought that was a net positive. In addition to, obviously, Sherman. We do have a number of cyclists who use Sherman, nowhere near the volume, obviously, of 11th Street. But there are positive aspects for users of Sherman in not having to share those lanes with the buses. So we certainly didn't take it lightly, but after a lot of discussion within our group, we decided that we could definitely support the rerouting, and the Florida-Vermont bypass is a big part of that.
Well, and then I guess this is a little too late to fix, but when I look at this and look at the reasoning that the median on Sherman is a consideration and the bulb outs are a consideration, which was all Ddot, but yet when I look at a map, that seems to make so much more sense, because you have the graceful turn from New Hampshire onto Sherman. You don't have as sharp of a turn from Sherman onto Florida when you get to the southern end. And yet, having been both on a bus and trying to cross with a bus turning at Monroe and 11th, that's just horrible. It's really sharp. I mean, you're requiring a very large vehicle to make not even 90-degree turns, but a little bit sharper than that. And that just seems like an odd thing to require of your equipment. Commissioner Wade?
Absolutely. I think it's a horrible idea. I think it's almost as bad as Director Monomay's plan to remove lanes from 14th Street just as we were opening DC USA. I think it's a terrible plan because it does not consider the pedestrians. It does not consider the number of children that use 11th Street. We have a major school there. We have several schools. We have Cardozo. It might be good for the bus routes in the morning and in the evenings to get the kids and the people to and from. We have bike lanes, busiest, as you already know, just about in the city. You also are talking about traffic jams. The very moment they put those, they redid Sherman Avenue, and I've lived through 4 incarnations of Sherman Avenue, and each one of them has been more horrendous than the next one. I knew that you were going to push all of that traffic on Sherman Avenue, which was designed specifically in another great traffic plan to move traffic north and south. So it was deliberately expanded to handle the traffic load. So in a great idea, they removed the traffic and they pushed it all over on 11th Street, which is single lane, always has been, always will be, because of the housing, which already has no front yards. And those houses are right up on the street. So every bus that rambles around past someone's home rattles and shakes it and messes with our foundation. This is not sensitive to the residents of Ward 1, of our ANC 1A and 1B. If it were 16th Street, double lanes, 14th Street, Georgia Avenue, but little old Sherman Avenue, all those buses along that street with those close houses, with those bikers who looked for a safe route, people, please, start thinking. Every plan is not a good plan. Every expediency does not help our neighborhoods. They're not thinking about our children trying to cross these streets. They're not thinking about the outdoor restaurants. We just spent a fortune in bringing businesses to our community. Now, we're going to have to share our outdoor space where we're trying to sit and eat and drink and socialize with bus fumes all day, all night. And as Commissioner Basin indicated, those turns are horrendous. You sneaked buses, more buses coming down Urban and turning up Sherman and going up Columbia Road. There were no buses coming down 11th Street and making a right turn onto Sherman, or going down Urban and making a left turn on 11th, or going down Irving and making a left turn on 11. You've already added bus routes to our streets without letting the public really know the impact it was making. I've sat on my front and watched buses hit cars making that right turn onto Columbia Road off of 11th Street. You can't say that that doesn't happen. And it happens more than once a month. People do not park on, as bad as parking is, people do not park on that corner because of the fear of their cars getting run into. So no, this is a horrible idea. I'm 100% against it. I encourage all of you to let Metro know that this is just not one of their brighter ideas. Just not.
I comment, this is the aspect where we did the study, we had that option. People asked, should you put it on Sherman, all the buses on Sherman, or all the buses on 11th Street, and we had to look at one or the other.
Why? Why one or the other?
But I also, in addition to that, we had the option in the recommendation, we'll just leave it as it is.
Yeah.
That's an option. That's one option we presented to you. That's part of the recommendation. But we had to make a recommendation of which one was better for buses and everything else, one or the other, Sherman or 11th Street. And we said of the two, Sherman and 11th Street was better than Sherman because Sherman was only that one lane to me.
How many schools on Sherman?
Other than Banneker, all right off of it, that's it. But I know over their number, Charter School,
You missed
the back of
Sherman's.
this school here is on 11th Street in addition to Duke Ellington also over there. So we know they're not, and that's why people asked about the bus service. They want to go a bus service to directly serve the kids in that on the 11th Street corner.
Right. The intent, again, Commissioner Wade, you asked why would we pursue consolidating the routes to begin with? And the intent there, the project team was looking at, well, how can we get more, relatively more frequent service along the 11th Street corridor? The 11th Street corridor has slightly better ridership than Sherman does, on a per trip basis.
Because Sherman isn't all the way through and it's not.
Understood.
Specific hours.
Commissioner Wade, just let him finish so that we can finish.
No, it's understood. It's a good point. And there, like I said, there were many pros and cons. This is why we're here tonight, to understand and get the kind of input that we're trying to understand from the community as to whether or not there's an appetite for the consolidated service, sort of regularizing not a great word, but regularizing the transit service on certain key streets and trying to provide a more frequent service to folks so that they can, it minimizes trip time. If you have more buses running down 11th, people will have shorter waiting times. And this opportunity sort of presented itself because Sherman is only a relatively short block east of 11th Street. And so when we look at both, we said if we had to choose one, not that we have to, but if we had to choose one to present as a recommendation, as a proposal, we said 11th is the one that seems to make more sense from a bus transit viewpoint.
Okay, Commissioner Goldschmidt, I believe you had a question.
What inspired the study? Why did Metro choose to study the 60s lines, but it's sort of just a generic answer? Was there a specific problem with these lines?
Well, over time, we hear about problems about all of our service. So we've been going and when we study the services, we look at the ridership. Those are the highest. We started looking at all the highest ridership quarters. And we studied every quarter with the highest ridership, and the 60 was the next in line. We've done every quarter in the city. I've been for the last 18 years, I've been doing quarters throughout the city.
So the idea is to get more people on the 60 bus.
The idea is to look at and analyze that service and try to get at some of the problems. We had problems at the northern end about overcrowding between what times the Georgia Avenue network, for instance, people said they're being left. So we've got all along different segments, there are different problems. We've just been studying all of those, trying to come up with real recommendations for improving the service.
Well, my comment to that would be, I see that you said you've received complaints about overcrowding and being left at the station north of the Georgia Avenue Petworth station, yet that's not being consolidated, right?
Because they are separate routes, so you got the 64 on New Hampshire and the 63 on Fifth Street, they come together at the Georgia Avenue Petworth station.
No, I get that, but what I'm looking at in the maps you've given me, what's been consolidated is south of that station, yet what's, again, on the maps that I'm looking at that you handed me, those look exactly
Right,
the same.
the corridors north of Petworth are much more disparate corridors. One
Right.
goes up to Tacoma. It's really not in the same corridor as the Fort Totten corridor along New Hampshire.
And
But I
then-
do want to say that, real quick, the September State of Good Operations proposals that Metrobus has submitted to the WMATA Governing Board has a couple of peak period trips added to Route 64 to try and address some of that overcrowding, mostly academic era overcrowding that happens between Petworth and Fort Totten.
What's different is another, down below there, between Petworth and downtown, you got two closely parallel corridors running very, they're side by side, where north of there, they branch out and go into different metro sections. So
The handout is really meant as a very quick overview of just the consolidation proposal. If you go to the metrobusstudies.com website, you'll see more of the various, the boards that we had at the public meetings that show many of the other proposals, and you'll be able to, I think, see a little better how they work in concert. Things like the Farragut Square extension of Route 63. It starts to gel better. I mean, the main one that we had our own concerns about was the consolidated route alignment. Hence our
Well,
presence.
but to your point, if there's a spur on the 63 that goes to Farragut Square, that's going to be more attractive for people at the Georgia Avenue station to use that. That's exactly my commute, and that would be a delight to not
Right,
go
and
underground. But
for
what I'm-
for
but my-
example,
But
then
my
the-
point is that you would actually be increasing the ridership, or potentially increasing the ridership. So you have crowded buses now, you're aligning it to try to deal with the overcrowding, but you're going to attract more people so that they're going to be even more crowded still.
But see, that's what I'm thinking, there's so much development taking place in the city, and people want to use public transportation. So it's better to have crowded buses and more bus transportation and using that, and that's why we're here.
Well, I wouldn't say it's better to have overcrowded buses.
Well, overcrowded, crowd buses, we have people out there.
We
It's good to
prefer-
have adequate bus service for the
Right.
demand.
We prefer a robustly utilized bus system as opposed to everyone trying to drive everywhere.
Yeah, well, but in a way, you're competing against yourself. You'd be competing against Metro Rail. Metro Bus would be competing against Metro Rail.
Depending on the exact trip, pair, trip origin and destination, and what we've done in terms of outreach, yes, in some cases, folks would be diverted from the rail system. In other cases, not as much. DC is kind of interesting. Metro has the different fare structures for bus and rail, which some other cities don't. And so bus tends to attract a lot of riders who are transit captive.
And people who would say they like to ride the bus.
Right.
It's very convenient for them, because they can walk outside their door on Sherman or on 11th Street, get on the bus, and you take them to the
Well, I think you're right on that. When a bus breaks down, you're not stuck in a tunnel. So yeah, I do know a lot of people that would prefer the bus. I also know that there's a lot of people in my general area, in southern Petworth, northern Parkview, that would very much love a bus that went to Farragut Square, because they were strongly advocating that the DC circulator do so
Right.
just a few years ago. So
And the intent of the Farragut Square proposal is to address exactly that kind of trip movement. The question then becomes is, would it be doing it for example, would it be doing it from the existing Route 63 alignment, coming down Sherman, scooting over to 13th, and then using Rhode Island Avenue to get over to Farragut Square? Or would it do it perhaps from the consolidated 63-64 alignment? Either way, we're advancing a proposal to get service over towards Farragut Square. We think that one has good legs and is a viable proposal. But again, the question that we have about, and we're trying to get input from folks, is the consolidated alignment.
are there any other questions from commissioners? I'll take a few questions from members of the, yes, Mr. Walton.
Hi, I'm Chris Walton. I live over here in Parkview. I have a few concerns about this proposal. First one is, I feel like it's short-sighted. There's hundreds of units being put in between there, Berry, and Euclid, and North Sherman, including a major grocery store. And the only way, I don't know if we're going to put a bus And the only way to get to that bus stop carrying groceries, I'm not even sure, because there's no good way to cross the border to catch a bus that's going down. So I think it's very short-sighted to move off of Sherman, at least in that location, we just get a giant development in the next few years.
And we were looking at that, that's why we had the bus going in that option, 11th Street going across Florida and over and going past all of that development.
Are you working with Ddot to improve the pedestrian services at Florida and Sherman?
That would all be looked at, and if this recommendation came to pass, those are the kinds of things we would look at. They'd have to look at bus stops and things. We hadn't gotten to that level. We were just at the level of doing a routing to try to.
If you're saying we're going to put this over on Florida and coming down to Delaware 11, you have to have a way to get people from the other side of Florida to that side of Florida. And that's the bus going back down. Additionally, personally, I am fairly worried about the not going down the local circle, particularly as we're talking about this Prairie Square idea. There's limited service getting from this side of town to that side of town. At least the local circle puts it a couple blocks closer to downtown. I take it all the time. I live over here in the west or east of Florida. I work in the Ddot circle and I walk in, so I walk and spend section 3. They all come to the circle and walk along the
We've heard a lot of comments about staying on 13th Street.
Yeah, so those are two of my views.
Okay, and I believe the gentleman in the light blue sweater.
Thank you. I'm very disposed to the way useful, but I do have a real concern about the proposal and making it this one consolidated too. If you look at the materials that you put out, first of all, you highlighted earlier that the outlet rate, the third loss, I think, much higher than the 11th Street loss, which seems like it almost done more. Particularly what you put out today, it actually shows that the speed, the average speed of the loss on Sherman is greater. See that occasionally something may block up traffic there. On average, it's still a faster route, based on your own studies. So in a sense, doing 11 is actually going to slow down for buses. And for bus riders, it's going to make it commute longer. And I would note, particularly to your point, there's fewer data points on the 63. That in fact comes into the peak hours, which is going to expect it to be most likely be backed up and be slowed down. I mean, Sherman moves quite well at non-peak hours, and I would actually expect you'd see a greater, a greater likelihood of having this be a faster commute during the day and stay on Sherman. And so as a bus rider, that affects me. As a bike rider, I also would say that going down 11th Street, dodging more buses, dodging one every 6 minutes potentially that's going down there, isn't very appealing. And given the amount of bike traffic that carries, again, it doesn't seem to make much sense. And so you're taking Sherman off the board as the place to be consolidated. And that's fine, but I would just have don't make the situation worse for both buses, for the time it takes me to commute downtown on the bus, and also make my bike ride more dangerous by doing this. I mean, at least just leave it as it is and don't make it worse.
The concern about the on-time performance, I mean, that was brought up by you in some of the earlier comments, I think, from the public meetings that we had earlier. We looked at that very carefully. Yes, the number of time point observations are much higher on the 11th Street corridor because it is an all-day corridor. But even when you look at the buses themselves they have APC, automatic passenger counters on them, automatic vehicle locators. There's just more data points on 11th. We did go back and we had meetings with bus operators at the divisions. We spoke with other planners, and the general sense was still that if we had to choose a consolidated alignment, we felt 11th was better, on balance. The other thing about on-time performance to keep in mind, and this cuts both ways a little bit, but I'm just going to put it out there. Right now, Metrobus's guideline for on-time performance is 2 minutes early to 7 minutes late. So that's a 9-minute window. And the data that we had in the first technical memorandum, and fooey on us for not making it more clear, some of the limitations of that data. But that 9-minute window is something that even on Sherman, they might be hitting it. There could be buses that are 7 minutes late, and they're still technically recorded as on time. Granted, that could also happen on 11. Right. No. Again, that's why we understand that there's pros and cons here. And that's certainly on the table. The pros are, and again, our fault if we're not explaining the pros well enough to the community, but the pros are by having more service on 11th, you do create more of a frequent bus corridor.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to, I think the point's been made. What I'm going to do, because we do need to move forward, I'm going to let the young woman in the beige jacket speak. Then I'm going to let Commissioner Wade have the final word, and then we're going to move on to the next presentation.
No problem.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I just wanted to actually echo what Commissioner Wade has said, and maybe I could have to say as well. You know, I live on 11th Street, and I think the idea that you would like to turn on to something that is similar to Georgia Avenue or 14th Street just doesn't really mix with what the residents on 11th Street really want. Either it's close to the residential street with different schools. Most of it, at least in my understanding, is zoned to remain a residential street, so you're not going to see a big explosion of businesses like you might in some areas, which might go to the street. But in most commercial streets in the entire city, 11th Street is never going to be that. And so I think the idea that you would want even half as many buses going on 14th Street would be up and down 11th Street.
No, we don't anticipate that level of service. What we're trying to do is just get and again, this is not set in stone. What we're trying to do is just get a situation where 11th becomes the street where there's more bus service on it, between 14th and Georgia. I'm not saying it would be exactly like 14th and Georgia, but it reduces the waiting time for folks on there, and it provides sort of a regularized grid of services, in this part of the district where folks know that if they need a bus, they can go to, the 14th or 11th or Georgia. The diffuseness of the service right now between Sherman and 11th is just something that, when we look at bus services throughout the district, we always hear about overcrowding, and one of the ways to address overcrowding is to try and provide more service. By taking the Sherman buses and possibly putting them on 11th, or in the early parts of the study, taking the 11th and putting them on Sherman, we're providing more service along one corridor. It could reduce the dwell times because there's more buses coming. So folks, there isn't as long a time that buses are waiting to get folks on and off the buses, etc. Those were the pros, of the idea of trying to get a quote unquote a good corridor, a show up and go corridor of bus service, which is something that in transit planning, you always try and do. You don't want to have the every third Tuesday, Mrs. McGillicuddy's 11GE-X service that, is not very regular, and folks don't know how to use it unless they can read a codex. It's that kind of thing that we're just trying to address. But I hear you. That's why we're here tonight, is to try and get this kind of input.
Okay, Commissioner Wade.
So,
As is, yeah.
Which we appreciate. Commissioner Wade?
well, not absolutely leave it as it is. I think you missed a great opportunity. My mother always taught me that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And if you're coming up, you want to come up Sherman Avenue, that's a straight line to the Petworth Metro. If you added more bus stops and made that an all-day route, it would do what you want to have happen. It will have more access and a better ride time for your riders. It would take that pressure off of 11th Street instead of doubling it. It could potentially relax it a little bit. And the lanes are the same. You have a single lane created on Sherman Avenue, but the 11th Street is since the street was built, has always been a one lane each direction for traffic, one parking, one traffic. Sherman was not that way. That was a new creation. So it was created, a problem was created. I don't want to see it exacerbated by pushing all of that traffic over to 11th Street. My recommendation, strong recommendation, free up Sherman Avenue for your increased bus ridership, add more bus stops, and make it an all-day bus route. Making it just rush hour, which has been most of my life, is not a good time now. And the main thing is we were told that when they were doing all of these street changes, that because of Metro, there wouldn't be as much car traffic, and you'll be able to go quicker to your destinations. You can walk from Metro to Sherman Avenue, no problem. Well, nobody really believes that. But this is the line of goods that we were sold. So my recommendation is just clear. Please do not increase any more bus routes on 11th Street.
Thank you, Commissioner Wade. How do we, back to my original question, how do we give you feedback? Through Ms. Chisholm? Okay.
And if you look at the last page of the discussion handout there, you'll see you can email us at info@metrobusstudies.com, and then you can also go to the metrobusstudies.com website. This, tonight's discussion handout is on there, and thank you.
Okay, well then I will say thank you for coming out. I will encourage people to reach out to you, and we will move on to PEPCO. So I guess it's out of the frying pan and into the fire? Yes. How are you tonight?
Doing very well. Thank you very much for having us. I'm Mark Battle, Vice President of PEPCO for the DC, Washington, D.C. region. I'm joined by Donna Cooper, President of the PEPCO region, and also Melissa Sherrod, Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Exelon Corporation. We're here tonight to give a brief update on the status of the proposed PEPCO-Exelon merger. By a very brief background, in June 2014, PEPCO and Exelon filed a merger application with the DC Public Service Commission. We also filed applications in Maryland, New Jersey, and Delaware. And also we had regulatory proceedings before FERC and also Virginia. In all the other jurisdictions, the merger has been approved. In August of this year, the DC Commission declined to approve the merger. And so afterwards, we went through that order. We looked very carefully at what the Commission pointed out as the deficiencies. We looked at what some of the opponents pointed out, and we kept the discussion going with all the parties. And we're pleased to announce that we reached a settlement agreement with the District of Columbia government, with the Office of People's Counsel, with DC Water, with the Apartment Office Building Association, and a couple of nonprofits as well. In the settlement agreement, there are approximately 120 legally binding commitments. I'm not going to go through all those tonight. I can say that from the very start, the kind of three buckets that we talked about in terms of the merger related to rates, reliability, and renewables. We continue to address that, and we can talk about tonight in three general buckets: affordability, reliability, and sustainability. Our very first application before the Public Service Commission involved approximately $14 million in investment in Washington, D.C. It was part of a customer investment fund. The proposal that eventually went before the Public Service Commission, again after a number of revisions over several months, was at approximately $33 million. As a result of the settlement discussions with the government and OPC and others, we reached a settlement which is approximately $72.8 million for the Customer Investment Fund, and that's divided up through the 120 different commitments I'm not going to go through specifically. But I will talk very briefly about reliability. Reliability is always a very important issue. PEPCO's reliability has been getting better and better over the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years. We're not where we want to be, but we're continually working on that. Our original proposal indicated that we would continue to meet the Public Service Commission's reliability standards, and that we would do so staying within the original budgets. And the DC Public Service Commission has standards which require us to meet certain benchmarks regarding the frequency and duration of outages. Basically, we can't have but so many outages per year, and the outages can't extend but so long per year. We've been meeting those benchmarks. However, in the settlement agreement, we agreed to not only meet those standards, but we're going to actually beat the standards every year through 2020. And I say 2020 because that's when the actual standards by law end. The commission will have to go through another rulemaking and have standards to go beyond 2020. And also the standards for each year get increasingly tougher. So as much as we're working on improving reliability, we can't just say, okay, we're at a good place now, and we're just going to leave it at that. Every year, the reliability standards get tougher and tougher. So we're going to beat the standards every year, and we're still going to do it within our existing budget. With respect to rates, in our original merger application, we committed, and this is still true, that none of the expenses associated with the merger would be recovered in customers' rates. As a part of the negotiations, as part of the settlement, we've now committed that there will be no rate increase for residential customers until 2019. That's particularly significant because we did have a number of rate cases kind of back to back, really from 2009 onward, and the last rate increase took effect in 2014. So the practical effect of this would be that rates would be stable basically for a 5-year period. So that's the affordability and the rates issue. Regarding sustainability, we've committed a lot of dollars to really promoting renewable energy, green energy in Washington, D.C. PEPCO itself is a distribution-owned company. We don't generate any energy, but we know that sustainability is very, very important in the district. The District of Columbia government has very aggressive sustainability goals, and we committed from day one to support those goals. As part of this settlement, we've gone beyond just a general commitment to support the goals and really put on the table what we're going to do in that regard. One important thing is we've committed to build out up to 10 additional megawatts of solar energy localized in the district. And to put that into context, currently the district government, or the district I should say, has only 12 megawatts of solar power locally. So that commitment would nearly double what the district currently has. We've committed to build out 4 microgrids within the district. We've also committed to buy 100 megawatts of wind power per year. The district government, you might have heard, entered into an agreement to purchase wind power over the next 20 years from a company. The district's purchase of wind power is about 45 megawatts, so we're proposing 100 megawatts per year. There's also investments to support the sustainable energy utility and others that are in support of renewable energy. So with that, I think, one last thing I'll say, again, there's, like I said, about 120 different commitments. One additional commitment relates to workforce development. We're working on a plan to invest approximately $5 million in job training, job readiness for careers in the energy field. Most likely working with the University of the District of Columbia, but definitely preparing our local residents for jobs with PEPCO and Exelon. So where do we stand now? We filed an application, or we filed a motion with the Public Service Commission to review the settlement in the context of the current case. The commission is reviewing that. We expect a process over the next 3 to 5 months to involve, community input, hearings, briefing by the parties. We're in a good place now, I believe, because we have so many parties on board who initially were not in support of the merger application. So with that, we'd be happy to take questions.
Sure. I don't have any. Do any other commissioners have a question? Wow, that's a first. Is there anyone, a member of the committee that might have a question? Oh, we have one back here.
So the purpose of the merger is really to bring together two companies that would kind of consolidate the service area along the East Coast. And what that does is it allows both companies to operate much more efficiently in terms of strong performance and just everyday economies of scale in terms of buying power, buying maybe 1,000 poles instead of 10 poles and things like that. That's very important because in utility finance, your rates are based on the cost of service along with whatever sort of reasonable rate of return your investors get. And so when the commission determines what our rates are, they look at what our cost of service is. And the cost of service will go down if we're combined with a larger company that can buy more products or our products at a lower price and also provide services more efficiently. I'm sorry? Well, geographically, so it's Pepco Holdings, not just Pepco. So Pepco Holdings involves Pepco, which serves Washington, D.C. and Maryland, Delmarva Power and Light, which serves Maryland and Delaware, and also Atlantic City Electric, which serves the Atlantic City, New Jersey area. That's Pepco Holdings. Exelon Corporation is comprised of ComEd, which serves the Chicago area, PECO, which serves Philadelphia, and also Baltimore Gas and Electric. So with the exclusion of Chicago, which is not contiguous with that general area, you can see that you have a service area basically from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., kind of all combined, and it makes all of them run more efficiently.
Okay. Sure.
I was just going to say, if you have any additional questions, well, first of all, there's materials in the back from Pepco, from the Office of the Mayor, and also from the Office of the People's Council. But also, we have a website, PHI Tomorrow, just PHI Tomorrow, which has a ton of information about the merger, all the filings. You can also go to the DC Public Service Commission's website. All the information is there as well. I would recommend PHI Tomorrow. It's probably easier to navigate because it's dedicated specifically to merger information. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. You know how to reach us.
Oh, I'm well aware of that, as you know.
Yes,
thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Is Laura Wilson Phelan here? Okay. I knew she might be late, so as she's not here, we will jump ahead in presentations and pizza. Sure, if you could.
Hello, we didn't really bring a presentation. We just wanted to introduce ourselves since we're coming to the neighborhood. My name is Julia Wright, and I'm in charge of the real estate for Ann Pizza and the development deals that we do in Washington. And this is Damon Apley. He's in charge of our operations for all of our stores. And we are opening a store in Columbia Heights, and we hope to be open in the first quarter of 2016. And I hope that everybody comes out to support us, or if you are not already familiar with us, we're all over town. And we're really here just to answer questions.
We did, but it got cold, so we threw it away.
Get pizza cards.
Yeah, I guess.
We have some free pizza cards.
Maybe we'll let you do that outside. I wouldn't want to bias anything. Quick question. And I probably could find this on your website. How many locations do you currently have?
We currently have 11 company-owned locations and 2 in the airports, 1 in Reagan and 1 in Dulles.
Okay. So 11 physically within DC. And
No, actually, we have 11 total restaurants. We have 3 in Maryland and 1 in Springfield, Virginia.
Okay. And what's your projected timeline for when you would open up in Columbia Heights?
It would be the first quarter of 2016.
And I may have other questions, but I'll see to Commissioner Nguyen.
I know where the location is because it's a block away from where I live, but do you mind explaining to the community where you're opening in Columbia Heights, where the new restaurant is located?
Of course. I believe it currently exists there as a museum store, so we're taking over that space right in the circle.
seating on the plaza, will you have outdoor space as well? Because I know some of those locations.
Yeah, we're going to have exterior seating. We'll have outside seating.
Okay.
Yes, it's private property that's owned by the landlord.
And I believe you're in the process of applying for an ABRA application. Do you know when that might be coming through?
You know, I don't know that. I can get back to you on that, though.
Okay. And I guess the last one I would have is about how many seats do you think the space would have? You know, roughly.
We roughly have 40 to 60 seats.
Oh, I meant for the restaurant itself. Is that about right? 40, 60?
Yeah, 40 to 60.
All right. Do you have any other questions? All right. Do any members of the community have a question? All right. Thank you for introducing yourself. I look forward to seeing you again.
Okay, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
If it's okay with the other commissioners, since Laura Wilson-Phelan wasn't here during this presentation, I would like to reserve that presentation to whenever she arrives. Okay, with that said, we will move on to official business. I believe the first item on the agenda is Project Give Back, which was added during the administrative. So I will hand this over to either Commissioner Wade or Goldschmidt.
Ms. Singleton?
Yes, good evening. Oh, it's me, huh? Good evening. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners.
Tell us a little bit about the project.
Thank you again. I am Wendy Singleton, as Commissioner Wade said, and I serve as the logistics coordinator for the board at Project Give Back. Project Give Back is a community service organization, and one of our biggest events is an annual food feed, where we distribute boxes to over 1,500 families last year. And this commission has been very supportive of us in the last few years that I've been serving on the board, and we submit a grant application to ask for their support in some of the funding. The event cost over $70,000, and we feed foods in all wards, and we feed and we serve and deliver. Volunteers come together, they pack the boxes, we serve them. I mean, we deliver them, some we drop in bulk, some there are individual volunteers that drop to the family specifically. And so the expenses vary. We understand that a grant like this cannot be used for food, so that's not what we're asking. We ask for the support for other things. We have equipment to rent, trucks to rent, and last year we used the grant's money to fund the purchase of boxes. Boxes alone cost $2,500 to pack these 1,500 food boxes for the family. So we were here at the meeting in September, and I understand there was a moratorium on grants, and we certainly are delighted that that moratorium has been lifted tonight, because we do need the support. And as I indicated, we serve families in Ward 1 as well as other wards. This year, approximately 300 families will be served in Ward 1 is what we anticipate. Again, the numbers may vary based on the funding that we receive. And I do stand on behalf of Project Give Back's president and founder, Ransom Miller, who couldn't be here this evening. So we thank you for any consideration of our request for grant funding again this year.
Thank you.
Are there any questions, Commissioner Nguyen?
Thank you for being here tonight. You mentioned that you are anticipating on serving 1,500 families, 300 of which would be in this ward. Are you asking for funding from the other ANCs?
No, we haven't been. No, we're not.
Okay. Is there a reason why you're requesting from us as opposed to only us?
Well, we've been successful in receiving the grant money previously because we serve the community here and we work from here.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Gordon?
Yeah, Yes, I see in your budget there's a line item for Bibles. Is there a religious component to your
No,
organization?
there is not. In fact, last year our funding we couldn't afford that line item. We're just hopeful every year, but no, there's not.
Well, I move that we approve the grant application request in the amount of $1,500 to be used for, sorry, be used for purchase of non-food items and equipment. And also that we have an individual receipt for the exact amount that is used out of our funding for the products that are.
Yes, that's possible. We have the specific receipt from last year that was specifically Willard boxes, and it covered, like I said, it's 2,500, so that 1,500 was certainly used in that invoice.
We do appreciate you guys getting in all your paperwork from last year, and we hope that it goes as smoothly this year.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I have one question before there's a vote, though. Commissioner Wade, you moved in the amount of $1,500. I believe the grant application has an amount of $2,000, so that would be a reduction, right?
Yes, because we're going to just do up to 1,500.
Okay. So, is there any more discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Any abstentions? I'll abstain. So that will be, the motion passes.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a ceremonial resolution recognizing the service of Commander Kishner. I think this is relatively uncontroversial. Commander Kishner recently was stationed at the 3rd District. His term of service has come to an end, and so he's being reassigned to youth services. We just wanted to recognize his service since he's done a really good job in our area. Actually, he did a better job before they redistricted the 3rd and 4th District, but we were still very pleased with how responsive he was. So, considering the straightforwardness of this and its ceremonial, I will move to accept the resolution as written.
Second.
Any discussion?
This is great. Thank you for doing it.
Okay. Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any noes? The motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is a settlement agreement with 014. Commissioner Nguyen?
Thank you. As many of you know, 014 is a landmark almost in the Columbia Heights area. And representing 014 tonight is Tim Huang, one of the owners. He and his family has been in the area for many decades now. And we have reached a settlement agreement. 014 a few months ago applied for an ABRA license. As with all restaurants and bars, the ANC protest the application so that we can establish a settlement agreement with the owner. And we've been in conversations for the past several months and have come up with something that we think the community will really like. I want to just highlight a few things and then allow Tim to speak on behalf of the restaurant and his family. Most important to many of you is the timing and operations. In crafting this settlement agreement, we looked at the settlement agreement for Mikuba Cafe, the only other restaurant on the 1400 block with an alcohol license. It's essentially identical. One thing to note is that we're in the settlement agreement. We are allowing 014 to start serving alcohol at 11 a.m. The Mikuba cafe hours start at 12 p.m. noon, so we're allowing them to start 1 hour earlier. 1214 and Mikuba Cafe will stop serving alcohol at the same time, 12 a.m., midnight. Tim, is there anything you'd like to say in addition to what I've mentioned so far?
No, not at all. My name is Tim Hahn. I just wanted to thank everyone for giving us the platform and for supporting us throughout the years. I know I haven't done a great job being at the much ANC meetings, but I've loved what I'm seeing, and I want to thank everyone, even along with the commissioners, for giving us the opportunity to serve the community. And I am all open ears and whatever the commissioners wants to recommend that's good for the community.
Are there any questions from commissioners? It seems very straightforward to me. Is there a motion to approve the agreement?
Yes, I move to pass the settlement agreement.
Is it seconded? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is a settlement agreement, odd provisions at 3301 11th Street. Commissioner Frost, if you would like to introduce this.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, I entered a settlement agreement with our provisions. They own Altus Grocery Store at the corner of 3301 11th Street. That's on the corner of 11th Street and Lamont. And they also will be serving alcohol beverages at their store. Due to that, they definitely had to do a settlement agreement with the ANC. I would like for them to come up and explain more about their project.
Hi, I'm Rachel with Odd Provisions. Hi, I'm Jessica. So we're actually transferring the ABRA license from the previous owners, and we're transferring the previous ABRA license. So they requested a settlement agreement from us. So they also requested that we not alter the hours of operation in our application to transfer, so that it could just be a more straightforward process.
And by they, you mean ABRA?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Are you planning on selling outside, serving alcohol outside the premises?
Currently, we'll just be selling for off-premise consumption.
Commissioner Flynn?
I actually have a pending financial matter with these two ladies that I could be a financial beneficiary of, so I have to recuse myself.
Okay. Hold on. Are there any questions from commissioners? I'll go to Commissioner Goldschmidt, and then I'll come back here.
So this is a Class B license that requires you all to have a supermarket with fresh food or frozen food or whatever it is. You guys intend to apply for a different license?
No.
So this is it? It's just going to be a grocery store?
Yes, it will be a grocery store. There's a possibility that down the line we might expand it to a full-service grocery store and then possibly introduce growlers. But at the moment, it would still be a corner market with more of an emphasis on fresh foods, possibly prepared foods. We can get the equipment for that. But definitely all of your household essentials, definitely produce, with the addition of beer and wine to go.
And outdoor seating?
We would like the opportunity to include that in the future, and so included that in the settlement agreement, but it's not part of the initial setup. That would be applying for another public space sidewalk cafe, which we haven't applied for yet. We're hoping to get transfer first.
Yeah. And for that, as you stated, you would need to apply for the public space permit,
Yes.
and then there would be an additional application through ABRA to expand. So
Yes.
there would be other noticing. Yes, ma'am, you can.
We can't hear you. Can you stand up? Okay, sorry about that. My name's Laura. I live a couple doors down from where you're playing. I was wondering,
We work there.
Currently, yes.
But we work on this project instead. Yes. Hopefully by the end of the year. We keep running into permitting issues, but we'd also love to hear about anything that you'd like to come up with.
All right. Yes.
We'll be leaving room 11 and opening the market. Correct. And we actually don't own the building either, we're renting.
Were there any other questions? All right. Is there a motion?
I move that we support the settlement agreement. I move that we support the settlement agreement.
Okay, is it seconded? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Commissioner Frost, do you mind retrieving Commissioner Flynn?
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is Ascensius Panamenas, located at 3322. I've been working with Commissioner Holmes on this. We don't have any paperwork yet. Do you mind if I explain what the issue is? If you recall, the proprietor was at our meeting last month asking for a stipulated license, but she had not applied for her ABRA application yet, so it wasn't placarded. What we would be considering tonight is supporting a stipulated license during this placarding period. She is interested in entering into a settlement agreement, which Dom is drafting, and we expect to have that wrapped up relatively soon, but it's not wrapped up today. So what I would propose is, what I will move, and then we can discuss, is that we support a stipulated license with the understanding that there will be a settlement agreement prior to the protest date. Just in fairness. Are there any questions or comments on that? Okay, is there a second? All right. So the motion before us is to support a letter of support for a stipulated license with the understanding that we will have a settlement agreement. No, I moved and talked about it. I moved. Yes, I moved. All right, so all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a resolution for a letter of support for Jubilee Housing, BCA application 18309A. Commissioner Gordon.
Yes, Jubilee Housing is developing the Maycroft Apartments at 1474 Columbia, and they're seeking a minor modification of their zoning permit, and I will let Martin Mallett, their Director of Special Projects, explain further.
Thank you, sir. My name is Marty Mallett. I work with Jubilee Housing. We've been around since 1973. We have about 800 units, or 800 people living in our 300 units, mostly on the other side of 16th Street. We have both affordable housing and a lot of services in our buildings. One of our buildings, the Maycroft, which is at 1474, we purchased in 2011 and are going to redevelop it into 64 units of affordable housing in the top 3 floors, and on the 10,000 square foot on the ground floor. We're putting in a family resource center, an out-of-time teen program, and a child development center. We requested your support back in 2012, and you gave us unanimous support for that change on the ground floor. Came back in 2013 to request we needed some public money for our affordable housing. Again, you gave us unanimous support. Our child development center we were going to stay in the building, is going to move on, so we had to get a new operator, and the new operator is going to be Martha's Table. Some of you may know them. They've been on 14th Street for almost 40 years. They're going to put their child development center in our building, and they want to make one small change. So it's currently zoned for up to 70 children. We want to reduce the space so that they will probably have 48 infants and toddlers, And on the back end of the space, they want to put a small, about a 1,500 square foot food preparation service for their McKenna's Wagon. McKenna's Wagon is a program, they provide food for homeless people throughout the city. So they just prepare the food there. There's no people that will come for that food, they just come. Volunteers come each day to prepare the food, trucks come in and take it out every day. So the request is that because we have to put this food service, we need a change in the BZA order, and we're requesting the support of this ANC. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner White?
You say the trucks will pick up the food?
Right, so they prepare food, I think 365 days a year, and there's 2 small vans that will bring the food out, pick it up from the back alley behind our building.
So there is a loading dock, that was my question.
It's not a loading dock, it's just an alley.
An alley that accesses the rear of the building.
Correct.
So it won't be tying up traffic?
Will not be on Columbia Road, and all the volunteers that come, they will also be coming in the back through the alley.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? Are there any questions from members of the community? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the resolution.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda was Board of Zoning Adjustment Case 19119 for 549 Park Road. Commissioner Holmes, is anyone here that needs to be relative to this case? Okay.
The language from the representative businessman, what they're doing is to add to, it's a 2-level house right now, so we're gonna do it, add another level to it. It's gonna be a 3-story apartments, they're trying to make it into a condo. Won't be no off-site parking, all that be on the side, they were gonna go and bring it.
Okay, and do you happen to know when their hearing is?
I gotta get back to that.
Okay. The reason I ask is because the special exception is to add a level to the house and to put in 3 units when only 2 are allowed by right. I suspect that we may have some questions that they're not here to answer. So I'm just, in fairness, I would like to have them present in order to. Motion to table it?
Motion to table.
Okay, so this will be tabled until the November 12th meeting. Sure. Well, I have a feeling, if I recall, Meredith Moldenhauer is the attorney representing this. She's usually here for her cases. I'd be surprised that she would let a vote go by that she needed. So I think we're going to be fine. We'll definitely reach out to them and make sure they're at the next meeting. All right, home stretch. Oh, that's right. So there was a motion to table it, and it was seconded. All those in favor of tabling BZA 1919, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion to table is approved. The next resolution is a request for DCRA to track and maintain a history of stop work orders. It seems to me that in trying to use their database, that's one thing that they really don't do well, and it's perhaps the most important thing to the consumer to actually know what's going on with the building. I presented this at the committee of the whole, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I just have a comment that this is a great idea. We ought to know developers who get stop work orders. We ought to be able to track them and figure out why they get them, and they ought to answer for the stop work orders. It's a real problem, people doing illegal construction in our neighborhood. There's stop work orders on buildings all the time, and there's no public record, and there doesn't seem to be any consequences outside a minor fine.
Commissioner Wade?
Yeah, and they stop work forever. And we build the property there.
Well, I will say that one of the reasons that made me put pen to paper, so to speak, is when I was having a conversation with the director of DCRA about a stop work order. When I mentioned what the stop work order was from, having gone up and read it, by the time I was emailing them, they said, well, the stop work order has been lifted and it's been satisfied. And that's not what it was for. And I said, well, I can't tell you what it's for because you've already erased it from your website. So it just seems to me that if they're tracking building permits, if this information is going in there, they should be tracking it as well. Okay, so I will move to pass this resolution. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. This next one is a little bit more complicated, but I guess that's what we're here for. There are currently, last week, there were two disposition bills before the Committee of the Whole of the DC Council. And one of them was for greater transparency, which I think is a good thing. The other one was requesting that closed alley lots and streets be subject to the affordable housing requirements from Law 2193 that went into effect in March. Well, on the one hand, that may seem like a small thing. I drafted a resolution requesting that the council consider exempting lots that are district-owned properties that are 2,500 square feet or smaller. The problem as I see it is we do have some very small district-owned land that is virtually useless to the district that they're interested in selling. But these smaller parcels tend to be useful, need to be part of an assemblage of property, much of it private property. And what I've seen in one example on Georgia Avenue, and I know of an example down there off of Florida Avenue, where the parcel in question that was in the disposition process that was going to be part of a planned unit development, the way that the law currently works is that that small parcel, once it's incorporated into a larger project, the affordable housing components of it are triggered for the entire project, much of it not public land. And what the result is, in some of these cases, is that that small little parcel, due to what it's doing to the larger development, is actually discouraging the potential buyer from proceeding. And they're rethinking the way that their development works and trying to move forward without including that lot, which to me is contrary to the intent of the law, because what ultimately we'll end up with is a smaller project that won't incorporate the district-owned property. The district-owned property will not be developable, so it devalues the district property. And the resulting project being smaller not only has less housing, it also has less inclusionary zoning. So it seems to me that while I'm requesting or suggesting that these small parcels be exempt from that, another way to go would be that the affordable components of the law only go with that parcel. So there's two ways to go. That stated, I think leaving it the way it is, it's not going to work. I think it creates a problem. It's kind of a couple of the shoe of development, and we're not going to get the larger buildings that we need on some of our transit corridors. So with that long introduction, are there any questions or concerns? Yes, Commissioner Wade.
So, what I'm understanding is that if they develop one to buy that
If they don't. Right, and they're only subject to inclusionary zoning. Well, the one in particular that I'm noting is actually in Commissioner Holmes's SMD. It's an alley lot. It's a very small lot. It cannot be developed by itself. It has no access to Georgia Avenue. And the developer, if they choose not to buy this lot, they can build on two sides of the lot, the other two sides being on the alley. It will never be developed.
But I just can't see it developing now. Not providing, not taking advantage of that lot. I just don't see it.
Well, let me put it to you this way: if the difference is one or two inclusionary units versus having to have 30% of the units be affordable, that's quite a difference. And it hits them financially in a way where it's actually more profit for them not to include that lot. Yeah, that's the one. It's to encourage the council to act, which would of course include public hearings, and they would have to mull it over, and they would probably have their own spin on how to fix the problem. I'm just trying to highlight the problem, that it's an unintentional consequence, that I really think that when the law went forward, they were thinking of very large developable lots that would be built upon by themselves or with one or two other properties, but not an assemblage of 5 or 6.
I feel more comfortable if I had a copy of the part of the because I'm not getting a clear judge or understanding of what the thinking was for the council members to pass. It's bugged me, I guess is what I'm saying. We're talking about 5 years.
Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
I heard your argument relative to the use and separation of other, but I want to know the triggering of affordable housing. So that seems to be the more intent why, including the parcel, would be sort of trigger for developers. You need to be able, you should explain, and when you're building, ensure you have affordable housing. I can sort of agree with your point about 30%, but your idea for this would be so that the city council can take another look at what the law says and offer some more detailed way, both accommodating developers, but also ensuring affordable housing is the primary objective when you're developing housing.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I may not have been very articulate, but to me, if a very small parcel becomes toxic or undesirable, and the result is a smaller building with less inclusionary zoning, you're actually losing affordable housing, which is contrary to the intent of the law. And so I think when you have larger parcels, clearly this makes sense. You're getting a lot out of it. When it's a small parcel that's oddly shaped or has practical difficulties where it would never be developed by itself, it's something that no one's going to take on if it's outweighing the good that would come out of it. So yeah, I do want the council to look at it, and while I've made a suggestion of what I think would be reasonable, they certainly could disagree with me and come up with a different way of solving the problem. I think it would make good sense if they did an audit of their small parcels. I think it would make a good idea if they could tell us which ones could be developed by themselves. But yeah, I think this was something that was overlooked because they weren't looking at the small parcels, and they weren't looking to see if they were in situations where they could be developed in isolation.
And they can't be used for green space. I mean, you have a road
Well, if they're used as green space now, this law doesn't apply. It's only if they're incorporating in a development that has housing. And I really don't think that the alley lot in Commissioner Holmes's SMD is going to be a very desirable green space. Again, it has no frontage on Georgia Avenue. It's in the middle of the lot. It's just, and the reason I bring this up is not just because this is something that, and I'll admit it annoys me a little, but I'm deeply concerned with the bill that's currently been introduced and is before the council, where they're thinking of including closed alleys and closed streets into the process, because that's going to create additional small parcels. And I think they need to solve this before they add to the inventory of small parcels. Okay, are there any other questions? Yes.
I understand your point about the development, but why wouldn't the very least force developers to make that square footage that they're talking this for the house?
Yeah, they won't do it. I mean, the option is find some way to incorporate that property and increase overall housing, which is good. Or I guess we need to be willing to say that it's okay that this lot is undevelopable and will not be developed in a lifetime, and therefore it will give less housing and less affordable housing. You know, but to your point, it's possible that the council could come up with some calculations, but it's, again, it's kind of difficult. How much square footage? We know the square footage of the lot. Then you would probably subtract the square footage of the commercial space, and then what's left over. Some of it might be partial units, some of it might be, I don't know. Yeah.
I just have a feeling that in our Jackson affordable housing, Jackson more housing available to the public, we lose the purpose of many of the laws and processes in place, which is to the zoning you just gone through, and we're working on now, is to make sure that we're not overdeveloping in an area. And I think that when we talk about affordable housing, we find a loophole to keep the developers from doing this what we want them to do, to make more affordable housing available. So one piece of that is asking for affordable housing in existing structures, but the new development section, this section will be proposed here, then no, because it would make it possible for the developers, or would make it possible, maybe not as much possible as they want to, if they wouldn't be buying it, if they couldn't make some profit. I'm just not feeling rural development is friendly right now. If they don't want to do what they can do, and they come to us every month looking for a way to get it under the law, we just wrote, we just redid all of this stuff. And we're in the process of still redoing it. So I would like ways to help them get around what the council just passed. Let them have a chance to do it. And let them come to us individually for variance rather than making it a part of the whole picture.
That it wouldn't be a variance. It wouldn't be a variance. I mean, this one in particular is something that did come before us. It was a planned unit development. We supported the disposition. We supported the project. Everything was in place, and then this law kicked in and kicked their feet out from under them. And they have no desire to move forward with that parcel. Yes. Well, then they're going to have to buy a lot of other property that they're not going to let go of.
To your question, and I work for an affordable housing developer, a parcel this size is just not, it doesn't work for my pro forma in creating affordable housing, because I wouldn't be able to create enough units to make the math work for me, but also for a for-profit developer, because this law is so, it's pretty intense, 30%. it wouldn't be profitable in any way for them. They wouldn't even be able to break even. So I am in favor of passing this resolution because I think it's important for us to kick it up, to have them take a look at why such property that should be developed isn't being developed.
What I was saying is if they want to buy a 2,000 square foot parcel that these DC owns and add it to their development, why not just make them put in 2,000 square feet of affordable housing in their overall unit, rather than just scrapping all affordable housing altogether?
Well, in a sense, that kind of is what it would do, because even the inclusionary zoning, if you're building in that square foot, would allow you to have that extra unit. I mean, even from an inclusionary zoning point of view, if you have a bigger building, you may have more units. But if you have a smaller building, then you have fewer inclusionary zoning units, which...
And I don't think you can move the units to another project of yours. I think that affordable housing has to be in that parcel. I don't know the law beyond that.
Yeah, I do know that the problem with the law right now is that it's kind of like when you're putting a little water in a puddle and there's a small little drop of water next to it. Once it touches that little drop of water, it affects the entire puddle, which is what the law does. It doesn't stay with that small little drop of water or the footprint of the parcel that's being incorporated. And so when you have a very small piece of property that's potentially being part of a much larger property, what it does to the market rate property that's been purchased is it brings down the value of all that. At least with the district-owned property going through the disposition process, there's a lot of negotiation to make sure that what the city's asking is commensurate with the price that we're paying. That's not necessarily true of the market rate parcels. Yes, sir.
I acknowledge the purpose of the rates. I'd like to acknowledge, my name is Dr. Rowe, I live on Park Road, and I would like to acknowledge Commissioner Wade's position, but also acknowledge that your proposal position is to get the conversation started and examine the law and find out ways to invite developers to help even nonprofits to use affordable housing and what might be the best solution so that we don't have blighted, unattended parts of land that are small and not entities, but that we also attend to the importance of providing affordable housing. So I think but it doesn't change the law what you're saying. Right. You're just saying it's talk about, go on record and say it's bring the conversation to another.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's very rare that the council ever takes up a resolution we pass and verbatim passes it. I would like to think that since their pay grade is higher, they put more detail, more staff looking on it, and trying to recognize what the problem is we're identifying, and then trying to find an adequate solution if there is one to that problem. So with that said, whether you necessarily agree with the exact wording of this resolution or not, I do think it's important that it go before the council to at least get them looking at it. And if they decide that this isn't the problem, then we'll have to be okay with that. So with that, I would move that we pass this resolution. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. So the motion carries. And now for the final resolution of the night. Again, oh, do we have two more? No, we don't. Oh, we do have two more. The next one is Commissioner Brown's resolution, working in homelessness.
Building from this conversation on the need to look at approaches to
increase affordable housing and looking at our housing crisis and looking at increasing housing costs, I think it's also important to consider our homeless population, and that population is increasing, and as we approach the winter months, we must consider those that are in desperate need of permanent housing. And I am introducing and asking the Commission's support on a resolution expressing support of the Mayor's Homeward DC plan, which is a 5-year comprehensive plan to work to address this homelessness issue, as well as making homelessness where brief and non-reoccurring. Place this resolution before the ANC. Other commissions have passed a similar resolution. I know one within our ward, ANC 1B, has passed a resolution, as well as in wards 2 and 8. So I'd like to move to pass this resolution.
Seconded. I think this one is relatively uncontroversial. Are there any comments? Questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, and then the final resolution of the night. Again, trying to deal with the issue of affordability and density. An idea I had is, and this was based out of an example on 11th Street that I was aware of, but I do know that this has happened before, where when you have an existing apartment building, and I don't mean a house that's been converted to an apartment, but an apartment building, oftentimes these are older, oftentimes they are in residential areas, they do not conform with zoning, they're over their lot area requirement. If someone wants to build out a basement unit, oftentimes they have generous basements that were originally where the building supervisor would live, or the mechanicals would be, much of which are much smaller footprints than they used to be. So something that's come up from time to time is someone who would like to build out their basement and increase the number of units in the building. And when that happens, it usually goes before the ANC for their approval. It goes before the BZA for their approval. And I've seen instances where this has not come to pass, even though the resulting units would be affordable because of the buildings they're in. So it came to mind that perhaps there's a way to streamline this process, increase the density in the neighborhood, or actually throughout the city, and increase the amount of affordable housing if we could perhaps agree that any developer who wants to build out their basement for additional units can do so without going before the ANC or the BZA, provided that if they create new units, that the number of new units they create in the basement equals the number of new units that are affordable, and if the affordable units are spread throughout the building so that they're equally distributed. It seems to me like this is a possibility of low-hanging fruit, perhaps giving someone an incentive to create more affordable units. I really don't see how this is contrary to the comprehensive plan, since these buildings already exist. We're not talking about additions to them, we're just talking about building within the envelope of the existing buildings. Any thoughts? The way I've written the resolution is that the new affordable units, I'll actually go through the bullets to make sure everyone understands them. I'm proposing that the council consider exempting property owners from lot area coverage and parking requirements when they construct basement units, provided that the increase in living units resulting from the basement conversions and construction must all be affordable, i.e. if 10 new units are constructed in the basement level, the building must have a similar increase of 10 affordable units. The new affordable units must be affordable at 50% AMI or less. The new affordable units must be equally distributed on all floors of the apartment building with no more than 30% of the affordable units located in the basement. And the exemption must only apply to pre-existing purpose-built apartment buildings and not to single-family house conversions. Yes, Commissioner Wade. I would begin to wonder if you were healthy if you didn't. Are you well?
My concern is, of course, now the parking, variances that you don't want to pay. If using your example, we're talking about adding 10 additional units to the existing apartment building, probably grandfathered in and do not have parking requirements. So, the impact that's going to have on the existing parking needs of that community. You've got 10 units, people who go as far as saying half on the half. You got 5 more parking spaces on the block that's already probably constraining the parking already because of the number of parking already. So I know we're in catch-22 with damage to do, damage to dump. You gotta have more housing, but you gotta have more parking. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if this is the answer. This is like creating more issues to be addressed. I mean, because you can't just add apartments without thinking about parking. That's what's happened to the city in the recent 2 years. That's because of this parking requirement we have. The number of conversions without consideration of the resources of that community.
No? I mean, it's a consideration.
So my concern with this is parking and the impact on the community with the position of the units. I don't know how to put it out there. But it doesn't matter to the city.
The one thing that we can do, Commissioners, yes, Commissioner.
My concern is that you're giving up the agency's ability to provide input. When we're talking about building affordable housing, I'm certainly not a developer, but I think this process, the ANC process, where we have to come before the ANC, not just listen to anyone and provide input, has an impact on their thinking process. If you take that out, I think it makes our role. So I think that works.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, Commissioner Wade.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the implementation. Ideally, we would like the affordable units to be scattered, and in your proposal, the building must have a similar increase of 10 affordable units. For example, if there are 10 new units constructed in the basement, if the upper level units are currently occupied, how would that be implemented?
Well, for instance, the one example that I know of that happened on 11th Street, the reason they wanted to build those, or they wanted to build the new units to begin with, is they wanted to do a full renovation of the building by moving people around the building so that they weren't displacing anyone from the building. So I would imagine that would have to be something that would be considered, and it would have to work that way.
Maybe you can count that in renovating.
Yeah.
Buildings.
We could.
That would be, that could be a workable scenario. But if you just want to do the basement, create a basement units, things that the issues that we discussed, you see it better.
No, I mean, it does, but again, remember that if this were something that got legs, there would be a whole council process. There would have to be legislation that considered those aspects of it. And, I mean, if within the resolution we're saying that no more than 30% of the basement units or 1/3 of the basement units could be affordable, then they're going to have to find places to put those additional units somewhere else in the building. I think that it's pretty clear that we would not be making the entire basement affordable or only putting affordable residents in the basement.
So, but I mean, it's still involving me when it gets to that part, and I don't want to spend any residential. Once they do a reno and they add additional units, I think they use their land office to do it. And that might become an issue. So, could you give it a little more to, so we can discuss it a little bit more and how to do it a little more comfortable? I know you said you did rework it.
Yeah, I did rework it based on the comments from the committee of the whole, and I've given this a lot of thought. I've talked to you.
But you give it a lot of thought, because it's been marinated in your head, but I haven't had the chance to kind of give it kind of thought. I think we need to do something. This is major, because this is opening up a whole can of worms for a whole number of developers. And you think we see apartment conversions going on now, where people build this place for their affordable housing needs. You open up this where they can say, oh, hey, I can do my basement in there, but I can put a few more affordable housing units. I can get rid of 40 affordable units and do 30% of what I had. I mean, it's just to me, I don't feel that it's been discussed enough when we look at all the ramifications. I think it's a great idea. I'm not saying it's not a good idea and that it has potential to work. But just think all ingredients are ready to serve the meal.
Well, I can assure you next month there won't be any new ingredients. Commissioner Goldschmidt?
I just want to speak in favor of it. No one's done that yet, I don't think, without caveats. This, I think, is a good resolution. It might not be perfect, but there's this idea that there's these old buildings in this ANC where basements are just undeveloped concrete disasters. And there seems to be no reason not to develop them. This city is desperate for more density and more housing. We have a housing crisis. Housing prices are completely unaffordable. And to add stock solves the problem. And we don't do it nearly enough. We all complain about affordable housing, but no one has any ideas on how to get more affordable housing. This seems like a great idea. I'd also say about parking. No city in the Eastern Seaboard could be built today with modern parking regulations. We are precluded from developing the city by parking. We're a slave to cars, and I would say that exempting basement apartments is fine with me. I'd say if you want to drive around, don't move into a basement apartment in Columbia Heights.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldschmidt. Any other comments? Commissioner Gordon?
Just to further on what Commissioner Goldschmidt said, I agree that I circle the block as many times as anybody trying to park at the end of the day. But I don't complain too much about it, because if I didn't have a car, I could get around in other ways, and that's the price you pay, not in dollars, but it's the price you pay for having a car. Better to pay the price in that way than in other ways. Main point, though, I certainly appreciate the concern about parking, but parking is a problem. The lack of parking is a problem. The lack of housing is a crisis. And I'd rather sacrifice a little bit of parking so that we can house people more efficiently and affordably.
But you did vote to eliminate parking on smaller parcels. So you can't have it
We didn't vote anything about parking on a small parcel.
I mean, what we talked about affordable housing affordable housing on a smaller parcel, but the bigger parcel is unnecessary tax. I'm not, but I don't.
Yeah, Commissioner Goldschmidt.
Well, the idea for the smaller parcel resolution was to get more density, and it's supply and demand. It's an old-timey principle. If we have more units, then the cost of units are going to go down. It's nice when those units are affordable. It's nice when they're not affordable. This community needs more housing.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, I'm just going to move this. As I said, I could give this a month, but I don't think there are going to be any more ingredients in the stew. So I'm okay with it going up or down tonight, and I will make a motion that we pass this resolution. Okay? Then all All those in favor, I'll have you raise your hands just so I can have an accurate count. Actually, why don't we do that? Commissioner Brown, do you mind doing a roll call?
Marvin Johnson,
No.
Matthew Goldschmidt, Doran Frost,
No.
Rashida Brown, yes. Josue Salmeron, absent. Tu Wen,
Yes.
Kent Bass, Donnie Loveway, Tom Gordon,
Yes.
Patrick Flynn,
Yes.
Bobby Holmes,
Yes.
Margaret Henley. Any of
All right. It was, how much you say?
Resolution passes. We have 7 yeas, 4 noes, 0 abstention.